A TENS unit basically works because there's two pads, kind of like a plus and minus, so they should be working in pairs. So first of all, you should not just put a single pad on your body and call it a day. If you notice here, they're actually paired up so that they can come in 2, 4, 6, 8 kind of pads. Now this commercial device that I have, that I highly recommend by the way, and I've recommended and purchased for my own family members, it comes with 4 pads. So what this means is you should only put on 2 pads or 4 pads. Or if you have more pads, put them on in even numbers. And how I talked about where you should put it, you shouldn't put it on where you feel pain. How this works is it sends a signal in between the pads. So it kind of crosses the zones. So if I were to put a pad, if my fingers represent where the pads are and in between is where my pain is, the signals kind of travel in between, and that's how it works. Now, if I put it directly over the pain, then yeah, it may make sense because the pain isn't in such a focal area and how the signals work and how it is being sent to your brain. It actually works better to your advantage to put it surrounding or adjacent to your pain site. So you can put it on either side, or you can actually even crisscross if you were to use 4 pads for your TENS unit. And the other tip was to crank it up, like crank that bad boy up and just have it go to town, right? No, that's not how you should use it, because you should start really, really low and just see what you need minimally to help you control the pain. Because if you crank it up like all the way up to like 100%, then kind of like, first of all, if you were to need a higher level and like to kind of relieve the pain for more intense kind of experiences, then you can't do that because you kind of maxed out what your machine can do. And the second thing is your body and your brain may not even need such an intense signal. So start low and then slowly go high. And then the third thing that I actually did not see addressed at all in these comments is, well, what setting you should use? Because it isn't just like you turn it on and you set the intensity. There's actually different modes. So that kind of is a segue into learning about kind of like the modes about TENS. And no, you don't need to understand like all the complexities and like the science behind it. Just the very basic is when the signal is being sent, there are different properties when it comes to TENS and the TENS unit. Very simple are 3 kind of parameters. One is how frequent it is that you're being sent the signal. So what this means is the timing in between it. So this is the frequency, like the hertz. So if I were to do a tap, it would be how frequent am I tapping it, right? It can be slow or it could be fast, right? Now, with chronic pain, what you want to do is actually have a slower tap, because that is better for your brain in the long term when it comes to things like releasing endorphins and just making your brain help to reduce the signals in the brain and to treat the pain as opposed to relying on the device. Now for acute pain, if you were to like twist an ankle or something, yeah, you want a really fast signal to really help you with that pain. But with chronic pain, we've been feeling pain for a while now. We kind of like, our body is used to sending these signals and understanding what it's like. So a more slower signal encourages us to kind of find other ways to manage our pain, like from our brain and psychologically, versus solely relying on a physical kind of property. So what you want is actually a slow setting and a slower hertz. So the lower that the hertz is, the slower that it is. And for chronic pain, you want to aim for something around like 2 to 5 to 10 hertz. So one thing I didn't mention is with TENS, there's no like one size fits all kind of setting. There's no magic setting. Everybody's going to respond differently, right? Just like how with anything in life, right? How we respond to a diet and foods and what we're allergic to, or like medications, right? So one setting may work better for you and somebody other person who may have like fibromyalgia or low back pain. You give 2 people the same device, exact same like everything in terms of like condition, even gender, race, whatever. They may prefer different settings and what works for them. So I highly encourage you all to experiment, and try different settings and not just give up after you try like one setting or something. Now there's a second setting. This one's a little bit more complicated to understand, but bear with me because understanding it can really help you understand how this device works and ultimately empower you really to help you treat your pain. And that's pulse width. And pulse width is basically when I kind of, if the analogy is making contact with the TENS unit, it's kind of sending that signal. It's how long that signal is being sent. if you think about it, when I make a tap, how long I make that tap in that contact for can be a time as well. So if I go and tap it and let go real quick, that's a really small kind of pulse width. Versus if I tap and then I leave it there longer, then that's kind of a larger pulse width. So what that is analogous to is kind of like a stronger, more intense kind of like sensation. Now, that's not to be confused with intensity, because intensity is actually a third setting. So you basically take your pulse rate, how frequently you're tapping, and then when you're making contact or when that signal is sent, how long that lasts for. The third thing you can actually do is how high you can crank the electricity. And that's like kind of like if you're familiar with like math and like the graph, it's the amplitude and what we call intensity. So that is kind of like the third factor and what people kind of think about when it's like, oh, crank it up or turn it up. But they don't actually often talk about how to set the other two settings. And because every unit differs in terms of how much you can set it, some may have kind of like presets. Others, you can actually even like dial it down to like the actual pulse width and like the pulse rate. Like for example, I have like the width set here. You can set like the hertz, right? The rate here. I don't know if you can see that on the screen. Versus a more commercial device, you don't have kind of like such fine dialing down of the features and the parameters here. Right here with like a device like this I've talked about on my channel, you kind of have presets. Let's talk about a commercial device. With something like this, you want to set it to tens unit mode, right? Because some of them have like other modes like massage mode or PMS mode, which is made for like muscle conditioning and for like those with like stroke to get kind of muscle function back. You want to set it to tens mode. And you want to find the parameter, and I encourage you all to experiment, that sends the signal kind of slower. So in like preset number 1, typically like the most like traditional, it'll send the signal like really, really fast and tap kind of like really not for a prolonged time. You want to find the one that is kind of like slowest. I know it's very counterintuitive, right? You want to find the preset that sends the signal very infrequently, so very slow, but the tap actually lasts a very long time. So if I were to kind of do it on screen, it looks kind of like this. Tap, and it stays there, and then let go. A long time in between. Tap, and it stays there, and then it kind of goes away, and there's a lot of time that passes in between it. So it's kind of slower, but it persists longer. The opposite of this, kind of more for acute pain, what you kind of don't want to use is it's a really fast tap, but it doesn't last very long time. So it's kind of like a prickle. And then what you can do is actually turn up and down the intensity, right? So that's how strong that ultimately the signal is. So if I kind of were to go back to what these three, really want to drive home the point here is how frequently am I tapping? So that's the pulse rate, the frequency. How long I'm making contact for, and that's the pulse width, right? Kind of what we call, they think they use microseconds. And then the third one is how intense it is. So like how strong I'm hitting basically, or sending that signal. So with chronic pain, you want to find the one that's really slow. And when it does send the signal, it lasts for a longer time. And then you kind of change the intensity. So with the intensity, the third setting is start really low and then slowly crank it up. Now, I'm not saying to start at like 0 or like 1 setting, you know, like you barely feel it. Turn it up until you get some relief and then leave it there and then try it out. Last thing is, well, how long can you leave these things on for? Well, it's more, there's not really a limitation for like safety in terms of how long you can use these things. You can technically leave it on all day. The thing you want to avoid is basically, well, first of all, using it all day, because it can cause skin irritation because there is like a sticky pad and it's an adhesive. Some people may or may not be allergic to it, so you may want to try kind of like on a small area of your skin first. But that's more of the concern, like the skin irritation and like redness more than the actual like safety of it, because you can use it for pretty long periods. I've used these for like a couple hours, even like after I've had some really intense flare-ups myself. So with that said, the last thing is for like those of you who may have a more advanced unit, if you happen to have one of these lying around for some reason, then yeah, a setting you want to use for chronic pain, I'll post on the screen here just to save some time on the video because I think this is getting pretty long, for kind of some ideas on what you can do for chronic pain. And if you have kind of like the more advanced units that can allow you to dial in these kind of settings. I hope this helps. And I hope this may have kind of piqued your interest in getting one of these devices. It certainly has helped me for my low back chronic pain. It has helped many other people. And the great thing about it is it works pretty quickly and it has really low side effects. You don't have to wait very, very long to start feeling immediate relief as well. So hope this helps. If this video has helped you, please give this a thumbs up and subscribe so that you can help other people who are experiencing chronic pain find out about it and benefit from this content as well.